Welcome to our 46th podcast. Today, we'll be talking about adapting change strategies for different personality types. What's the one thing you can do now to ensure you keep aligned and on board with your change management? Keep listening to find out.
Welcome to Harmonious Workplaces, a podcast about corporate culture, organizational change management, and workplace behavior. Harmonious Workplaces was started by independent consultants Rich Cruz, Ben Kleinman, and Cheryl Volpe to explore, challenge, and build on various organizational culture and change management concepts. It's a blend of theory and practice based on their personal and professional experiences working with companies of all sizes across various industries. If you own a business, lead a team, want new ideas about the corporate environment, or just want to listen to a group of consultants talking about how to make work more enjoyable, we invite you to sit back, relax, and dive in with us to Harmonious Workplaces.
Hello, Harmonious Workplaces listeners. We're so glad to have you today. We're going to be talking about personality. So excited about this. My name is Rich Cruz. I'm an organizational development consultant, and I'm joined here with my co-host, Ben Kleinman. Hi, Ben.
Hey, everyone.
And Cheryl Volpe.
Hi, everyone.
And welcome to Harmonious Workplaces. Here we go. We're going to be talking today about personality types and how we might be able to make our change initiatives just a little more successful by understanding the people that we're working with, right?
Mm-hmm. It
Yeah.
sounds like such a no-brainer on paper, and yet you'd be shocked at how revolutionary that seems when you go and try to put it into practice in some
Sure.
companies. And
Sure.
I guess maybe one thing we could think about is this sort of idea follows on, Rich, from some stuff that you and Cheryl were talking about at our last podcast, where you mentioned some
Right.
different personality type frameworks. You had mentioned Ocean as one, Big Five that we can dig into. And then there are a couple of others that I'm sure most people have heard just because they've probably had those administered at some point. And so maybe if you guys are open to it, we could start with just a little overview of some of the different personality type assessment tools and why one might administer one of these assessments, or why you might try to understand someone's personality type in general. And then we can get into some of the more tactical stuff, how you can adjust your change initiative or design your organization based on some of these things. Sound like a
Sure.
relatively reasonable, non-confrontational approach?
No contention whatsoever in there, Ben. Nice.
All right.
We're so easygoing. I mean, it's like,
We're all about the kumbaya.
Yeah. I'm going to ignore all those triggers.
right. The agreeableness is very high in this room.
We've been fantastic.
Yes. So let's just talk a little bit about like why. Why do we have personality assessments to begin with in the workplace? And they can happen during selection processes, and they can happen while you're working for the organization, right? And so one of the big reasons is we're trying to predict behaviors. We're trying to predict how people are going to, be in the workplace. So, having said that, I think we need to have instruments that are very reliable and valid, right? Because they need to be able to say, okay, this is measuring what we need to intend to measure, right? And that needs to be valid to why we are trying to measure this, right? So we need to be able to predict how somebody's going to fit within the organization or fit within their role within the organization, or how they're going to react with somebody else, right? That's validity. And then they need to be reliable, meaning that for the test taker, every time they take the test, and there are factors that play into that, right? If you test, retest is a measure of reliability. But if you do too much of it, then people are like, well, I know all the answers and I can game the system, right?
Like the eye test. You take
Yeah,
the eye
right.
test at the doc, and like 40 years later, you're still on the same prescription and you're walking around like Mr. Magoo out there.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. You
Fascinating.
go in there with everything memorized, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Don't study for your eye test, folks. It
No, don't cheat. It's not
doesn't help you.
buddy. No.
Right. Right. And there's the thing, there are actually videos out there on how to pass a personality test or how to pass. It's amazing, right? But we have that. So, but
And
reliability
and
means
just as an aside, our good
it
friend Shermie, the hermit crab, had a couple of nice words, wise words of wisdom in a recent cartoon, which you guys were so lovely to put together. And
sure.
um, yeah, go ahead, Rich.
Well, yeah, I was just gonna say, sure. I'm here in Canada, and Shermie has crossed the border with me on
Shermie is a
a
man of
passport.
international mystery and intrigue,
That's right. That's right.
bringing harmonious workplaces cross border, sharing the love,
Sharing the love.
bringing all into his hermit crab shell. But so it okay, so at a high level, it makes sense why we might want to administer personality type assessments. We want to get a sense of who we have in our pool or who we're bringing into the organization. Presumably, want to find people if we're bringing them in that meet and fit into our current sort of criteria or fit into the ways of working that we already have that will mesh nicely with the people that we have, the culture we have. And this is one of the ways to do that. And then
Mhm.
we want to see how people might react to each other, understanding that different personality types are geared towards certain things. Naturally, some people are leaders, some people are thinkers, some people are a little bit more quiet and heads down and do a lot of work. Some people need to
Right.
banter a little bit to kind of get into the the reasons behind things. So it varies quite a bit. All makes sense, that's great. Maybe what are some of the more well-known tools and pluses and minuses, or, um, are they still valid? That kind of thing. I know we were kind of in prep for the show talking about some of the well-known tools that are discredited nowadays or looked askew.
Before we
Mhm.
before we jump into the models, I just want to add one thing to all you're saying.
Yeah, please.
In that the data that it's enticing, the idea to get data that categorizes one of the more elusive aspects of business, which is personality and behavior, right? So these tools, when they first came into being, that enticement to have that data to make predictions about people was very popular, almost like a parlor game in the beginning.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so the reason that this continues to be popular and that there are new forms all the time is because you don't have to be an expert to use them. You don't have to have a degree necessarily in psychology to understand them. And you get data, whether or not, as Rich was saying, it's reliable, consistent, and valid over time is the trick, right? But the idea that makes them so appealing is to get that data on this elusive human element in the workplace, right?
I love that. That's so
Right.
cool. Thank you. So that really good. Thanks, Cheryl.
Yeah, for sure. So let
Helps understand their continued appeal.
yeah.
And to kind of illustrate that, right? There are many times where I've gone to networking events and somebody brings up the Myers-Briggs, the MBTI, the Myers-Briggs type indicator, right? And we'll go, "Oh, what are you?" And, I personally am an INFJ, right? And then like 3 or 4 people go, "Oh, I'm an IFJ too, and we're like the rarest ever." And,
It's like
you know, and
the business zodiac, right?
Right, all of a sudden, we have 6
right,
unicorns in the room? Oh my
right.
goodness.
Oh my gosh, we're you know, uh, and, it was I mean, there have been studies lately that have said, "You know what? It may be a reliable instrument. It may give you the same thing time after time for the same person or the same type of person." But as Adam Grant, who's an industrial organizational psychologist, he's got a podcast. A lot of people know him. He's published several books. Um, he's like, but and it's not just him, but the validity of that to measure as a predictive measure hasn't really been proven. There have been they've used other tests that had nothing to do with how somebody was going to work or behave, and the and the correlation was very strong between the two, right? So, um, I'm not saying that I personally like knowing that I'm an INFJ, but, you know, I wouldn't probably use that. I definitely wouldn't use that in the selection process, personally.
Okay. It's not on your LinkedIn page. I haven't seen it. Got it on.
It is not on my LinkedIn page.
So,
Yeah, I'll tell you, there's so many inventories I've taken in my life. It's
well, let's
crazy.
dig into a couple then, just so people get a feel. I mean, we don't have to exhaust the literature, but get a feel for what some of these tests are and the types of things they measure, if they all measure the same kind of things, just in slightly different ways, or if they're going after different types of parts of your personality. And so one might be good at X, the other might be good at Y. One might be good if you're trying to assess someone in a more stressful, crisis driven situation, or one might be good if you're trying to assess someone's personal stuff, but not in a workplace. So maybe we dig into that a little bit.
Yeah,
Okay,
sure.
cool.
Well,
But, oh,
before we do that, why don't we take a quick break?
ooh, teaser.
Uh, yeah, teaser. So let's take a quick break, and when we get back, we'll list out some of those. We'll be right back.
Oh, hello there. It's me, Charmy the HR Hermit Crab, here with some big news. I just released my very own cartoon book. It's called Charmy the HR Hermit Crab. Go figure. And now it's available on Amazon. It's packed with laughs and insights for anyone who's ever had to navigate major change, miscommunication, over the top bosses, or just plain silly antics in the workplace. So what are you waiting for? Grab your copy today at ShermyHRCrab.com or the Harmonious Workplaces website at HarmoniousWorkplaces.com. Let's make life and work less crabby and more harmonious. Bye for now.
And we're back. So we are going to list out a few of the personality assessments or other inventories of personality frameworks that we know of. And it's not an exhaustive list. There's quite a few worldwide. Right? So first one we started off with was the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, the MBTI, as we said, highly reliable in many cases,
Yeah,
but
and it's very well known. If
very well.
chances are, if you're going to have taken some sort of corporate assessment or something like that in the corporate setting, someone will have administered the Myers Briggs type indicator, or MBTI, like Rich said. Even I've heard of that one. And
I took it in
yeah,
junior year of high school.
holy cow!
Yeah, it's good. They still administer it in some classes like that.
Wow.
So,
And have your
um,
results been consistent over time? Like, are you still the
yes,
unicorn?
yes, but at the same time, it's like, am I really, or am I just answering the questions the way I want the result
Okay.
to come out?
Okay.
Right. So,
So what are some things that people like about um, the Myers Briggs, the MBTI?
well, I think they like to be either they like to be in some kind of one of those categories. So there's a social aspect to it when you start sharing.
I see.
Oh, I'm this, I'm that.
And is it
But
is it just has it become popular because it's easy to administer? Like, Cheryl, you were saying you don't need a degree or an army of statisticians in the background, or you don't need fancy tools and technologies. It's just how you answer a handful of questions, and then it plunks you into one of these, like a Plinko machine. It just kind of plunks you into one grouping.
That's true. Right. There's quadrants, right? There's 16 aspects. It seems like that's enough to classify just about everyone on the planet, right?
On the
And
planet.
that's
Okay.
also part of
right,
the con in that it is cumbersome. There are so many aspects. Models over time have become way simpler and even more complicated too. Yeah.
right.
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 Okay.
Well, and as we're going to see in a second, as much as that one has 16, different types of personality profiles that can be created there. There are other ones. There's a 16 PF, which actually we can administer through our testing platform, which is that's considered a very a reliable measure and valid for how people work and behave, in the workplace. It's a personality test. There's also a competency piece in it. It's bear with me for 1 second. It measures interpersonal orientation, relationship management, teamwork, coaching, development talent, managing, coordinating, motivating others, adaptability, learning agility, driving for results, initiative, analyzing, and decision making. So, you know, it's it
Pretty
has
much everything.
yeah, right.
Do the others like the MBTI or some of the others maybe we'll talk about, or you mentioned last time, Rich, one called the Big Five Ocean. Does
Right.
do they also tend to measure the same types of things?
That's a good question. So, the ocean, right, which is stands for openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism, and the opposite. I'm not going to get into the opposites. You all can look up the
No, you don't
opposites.
need
Can
Yeah,
we just be
but
clear about the neuroticism? There is an N on there. I wasn't sure for a moment there. Neuroticism.
yeah,
Okay. You
neuroticism. Yes, 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 absolutely. Not the other thing. Did I say that? I hope I didn't say the other
I'm
thing.
pretty sure you said the right word, but I'm making sure that everyone else.
everyone
Neuroticism.
understands it's
Yes.
ocean with an N.
And but so, and the opposite of neuroticism, that one I will say, right, is emotional stability, right? So, but for whatever reason, that one ends up being in the opposite. They talk about that
Mhm,
one being in the opposite. More or less what you would say the negative, right? But that one is actually that one's determined to be fairly predictable for how people will interact with each other and how they will behave, now and into the future. And it's pretty stable,
so it's a
particularly in
little
our
more
adult
focused on
lives.
the interpersonal reaction or the team dynamics as opposed to some of those other things that were maybe more individualistic,
No,
the
it's
16
it's
PF?
it's a little of both,
A
really,
little both.
because you've got if I'm conscientious, right, if I have a high degree of conscientiousness, I'm going to stick with my goals. I'm going to, so that at an individual level, I have that, commitment, but on the group level, I may be more apt to, be team oriented
Mhm,
and, work with others well, right? So there's that element of it, right? And we all have, kind of various
mhm,
degrees of that.
mhm.
So that's a good one. And the 16 PF actually kind of correlates with the big 5 in some ways. They've had some, where you can group some of those elements together against the big 5, which I think is pretty interesting. We'll get into depth of that, but that's one that, I think a lot of people use. Another one that I found is the predictive index. You may have heard of and taken the PI, right? And that actually delivers 17. So there's a work preference aspect, and then there's a cognitive aspect to it. And it's really like a word association type of thing. Like, how would you, or what of these words describe you? And then the next one is, what do you think others would describe you as? Or what of these words would be applicable to this job? Right. So use that and then it gives you a report and you can fall into one of 17 different categories. I happen to be an operator in that one. That's-
And are all of these breaking people down into categories that are more or less the same at the end of the day? And the Myers-Briggs has 16, the personality index has 17, Ocean might have, or sorry, the predictive index might have 17, the others
right.
might have 10, 15, 20, whatever. Are they all more or less the same types of groupings in terms of people might be seen as more analytical, more rules following and rules driven, more narcissistic, more social?
Well, that's it's hard for me to say that they would be, um, categorized in a specific grouping. It's how do I put this? If you go through the whole training, right, there's getting the results, and
Yeah.
then, at face value, you're like, "Oh, okay, I'm this, and I align with that," right? But when you dig into what the results are and the training behind it, and there's, I think, the part that in our change that's missing, right, is that managers, if your organization is going to invest in one of these, your management should be trained in how to interpret the results and how to use the results to interact with others and leverage their strengths. Right. There's another one, the Clifton Strengths Finder, which is administered through Gallup. And so there are some other strengths based approach assessments that are out there. But if you're just using this to like lump people together and categorize them, what's going to happen is you kind of open yourself up to bias, and and that's been shown in various studies, right? Whereas when you have the training on how to use this and how to interact with others and looking for what are the common ways we can work together, what are the ways that our work is going to diverge, right? All of that goes together, and so that they can be used to strengthen the manager and employee relationship, and conversely, if used for the forces of darkness, they can they widen that gap
Which
tremendously,
can be known as the hiring process, right?
that's there you go.
It does depend on what stage of the work cycle that you're using them to, right? If you're using them to vet candidates for a position, there's that use, right? And there are different
Mhm.
types for that. If you are using them to categorize the team that you already have to see for change readiness, for example, or strengths and, we would never see weaknesses, but like areas for improvement leading to training, right? That's employees that you
Right.
already have, and then, at the opposite end of that work cycle could be, we have to downsize, Now I
Mhm.
have never personally seen a company use them in a clearly attached way to downsizing, but skills assessment, I think there's always that fear in the back of anyone's mind. Why is this happening now? And what will happen if will I get the training or will I get something
Yeah, yeah.
else?
Sure, sure.
And you're right. You're right. You might not need to be an expert to administer them, but I'd like to, after a break, maybe talk a little bit more about what types of people in an organization tend to use these tools. Do you need
Sure.
HR? Do you need someone specific? Or do you
Well
need a consultant?
well yeah. Well, if I can, so there are certain tools here where you should be trained in it. Actually, arguably, you should probably be trained in any or all of them. And some of them do require an actual certification to administer ethically. And
Yes.
because it's intellectual property, it needs to be purchased, right? So, the PI is one of those that you actually have to purchase. You do not have to be certified in it to administer it, but um, you can be, and arguably maybe should be. The DISC, which measures dominance, influence, steadiness, and conscientiousness, you should be certified in it from one of these several different bodies that do that, right? The uh, there are some self-guided ones like the High Five, but the organization that administers it, somebody there will have bought the license and will have had somebody trained to administer it and deliver and help to guide the results, even though the results are sent to you. However, there are other ones that you don't need to be, certified, like the Enneagram, the Ready, RHETI. You don't need to have a certification for that. It's open, but it's also open for interpretation in so many different ways that people have invalidated it time and time again, right?
It's a little bit better than the Rorschach.
Yeah, right. Maybe. Um, and, trying to think if there's the Clifton Strengths Finder, right?
Right.
Which you should be certified in that. The Big 5 has some certifications that are available for that. And then you have the 16PF, which does not require certification, but it is a licensable product, and, specifically, like, we license it, at Harmonious Workplaces, for our use with our, clients. And, that's one that's, um, you can administer, but you don't need the certification, but you should go through the training on it as well, right? So it all comes down to what? It's you gotta know what you're measuring, how it's being measured, and how to interpret the results, and then how to apply it, right?
Ethically.
And it's that last part that just, you
Yeah.
know, trying to
It's
lead change. It, if you don't know that, it's virtually impossible to leverage this.
so like anything, it's a tool, and you have to know
It's a
how to
tool.
use the tool and when to use the tool,
That's right.
when to use the screwdriver, when to use the hammer, when to use the wrench, and
Hmm.
what it's going to get you, and how to get it to do the thing that it's doing the best.
Right.
Okay.
And
Yep.
and I should clarify when I said in the beginning that you don't need a specialization to use these things, I should have been more specific in that you don't need to specialize to take them, honestly. They are
No,
accessible
yeah, no,
because they are
absolutely.
assessments of where you are at that
Right.
time.
Right. Right.
What were you gonna
Yeah.
say, Ben? It's time for
No, I was
a
just thinking, like we were saying a few minutes ago, maybe we take a break and come back, talk about why one might administer these, or Cheryl, you were talking about who might administer these, and then think about, do we want to try to apply that to how you implement a change, or is that
Hmm.
a topic for another day?
No, I like it.
let's
Okay.
do it.
We'll be right back.
Dysfunctional organizational cultures and poorly managed transformations can devastate employee morale and motivation, leading to disengaged employees, poor work quality, and the loss of your best people. The impacts to your organization include high costs, low productivity, and wasted resources. At Harmonious Workplaces, our purpose is to help you build the best workplace possible. We are advisors applying proven organizational development and industrial organizational psychology methodologies to help you become your best organization. We are doers, using time-tested principles to help you execute organizational change initiatives smoothly and successfully. To discover how Harmonious Workplaces can impact your organization, visit www.harmoniousworkplaces.com and book a free 30-minute information session with one of our consultants today. Again, that's www.harmoniousworkplaces.com.
And we're back. So we've been talking about using personality assessments in the workplace. Try to put this into the context of change, right, within the organization, and that's kind of where we left it before the break. So how can we use those?
When we are looking at a change that is in the pipeline, to evaluate the teams that you have, who would be best to lead the change, who will be the early adopters, who already understand what we're doing, who need that additional training. And no one is going to be penalized for falling in any one of those categories. It's just a matter of here's my team. I already believe in them, but where can they be placed along the life cycle of this change? There are
Sure.
assessments.
Yeah. Yep. And
And
like,
Cheryl, I'm sorry, you were sorry, Rich. Do we want to get into, Cheryl, something you brought up about who might administer this?
Sure. That
That's a really good point.
it
Like some people might do it in a way that would help them, understand the folks that are in this pool of group people that are needing to do something differently, and other people might use them in different ways that might not be so ethical.
That's right, and
Right.
it does depend on the organization and what kind of hierarchy they have, what sort of management structure they have. Do they have a human resources? Do they have a talent optimization? Do they have recruiters? Is that one person? Do they do all 3 of those roles,
Mhm,
right? And
mhm.
it is more typical that a manager would want a person in human resources or related department to administer these tests, because a manager could buy a test, administer a test, and then not know what to do with those results, like we were saying earlier.
That's true.
Consultants like ourselves, we are prime candidates to be hired to come in and administer the test, process the results, and have
Mhm.
recommendations based on those results, and we
Yeah,
execute them as well.
sure.
In a more unbiased or third party kind of a way.
Yep.
Right.
In your experience, do companies typically pick one and administer that, or do companies take maybe 2 or 3 of these, given it sounds like they look at people in slightly different ways and group people in slightly different ways, and they all have the same general goal of trying to understand and maybe predict how someone is made up as a person and how they might react in the workplace, but they kind of break them down into slightly different groupings and categorizations?
Yeah, I haven't come across where organizations have used multiple
Mhm.
different types of the same assessment, right? So they might use different assessments, right? They might have a personality one, a competency one, and then some kind of work performance assessment, those types of things. But it seems to me that, if you when you choose one of those, it really starts to speak to the culture of the organization, right? So if you're like choosing a couple of them to try to validate against each other, um, it it might backfire. So again, I've not seen somebody specifically like use the PI and then the big five and try to mash them together. They might do it, but they might have started with the PI and then said, "Hey, I'm going to go to the ocean instead," or vice versa. You're right, something to that effect. Um, but I haven't
Mhm.
seen an organization do that. That said, though, I'm a strong proponent for if you're using this for selection or promotion or something like that, that's not your only gauge, right? I mean, it can be certainly used to determine fit, as long as that's valid within what it's trying to measure. But it shouldn't be like the only thing, right? You're looking at resumes, you're doing interviews, you're looking at other types of interactions that you have with the person to make those determinations.
Mhm.
I agree with
Yeah.
that, Ben. I've never seen multiple assessments commingle during one phase or stage or cycle section of a cycle. But, to Rich's point, the choice does reflect the culture of a company, which is a really great point, Rich.
That's super interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a
Yeah.
whole 'nother podcast.
And that said, though, so let's just say the company decided to use something like Lumina Spark, which is another suite of personality assessments. One of my colleagues, Nikita, he is an expert in that and actually teaches other people how to use it. But it's a suite, so there are different types of assessments. There's a personality assessment, but then it goes into some deeper applications of it. So it's from Lumina Learning. So so within a testing center, right? You might have other assessments that complement it within there, but it's not like we're pitting two against each other and going, Thunderdome, which one's going to win? Right. Dating myself there.
I love the pop culture references. We don't
But
need
like
another
if
hero.
right. Oh man, I just love that we could like pull those theme songs out too.
Today's episode sponsored by Mad Max and the Thunder. So, Cheryl, you were just about to go into something that seemed like it could get kind of juicy in terms of how you might take some of these learnings and then apply them to a change initiative. And you started getting into giving change leaders some kind of window into who they're working with and who they might need to lead on a journey, who might be where on the change curve, or who might be kind of someone that you could bring on as a real change forward ally, and who might be someone who needs a little bit more encouragement, things like that. Say more about that.
Sure. I would love to mention our colleague Katie Thomas, also a Brit. She works at Sten 10. She used to work at Talogy. We have just become acquainted with some one on ones with our backgrounds. And if you've seen her on LinkedIn at all, you know that she is very uh, deeply versed in these topics. She is a personality assessment business psychologist. And change readiness is one of the things that she and I got to talking to recently. And that is, again, I also want to connect this to the culture being reflected in the choices a company makes with some of these assessments. We go back to some concepts that we've talked about almost every episode on our podcast, which is going back to the why, right?
Mm.
The
Mhm.
why is important to which assessment you choose, what you do with that data, and how it affects moving forward. And if
That's a
that
great
why
point.
is for change specifically, then there are assessments for that. So to answer your question, Ben, because there's resistance, because we know that this is the challenge with change, any advancement or advantage that we can get from using tools like these to go into a change with the least amount of resistance is the why. With
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. Makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Now, one of the things that comes to mind on, like, looking at the big 5, which, I don't know if you noticed, it's one of my favorites. But, if you're looking for like, John Cotter's guiding coalition, or, um, Army of Volunteers, again, another, Cotter thing, but, to get those stakeholders, to get the ball moving, to get those change agents, if you can find people who have maybe a high degree of openness, a high degree of agreeableness, who are somewhat emotionally stable, and maybe a little of the extroverted side, so they're is more a little more social, you may have some people that can start to spread the word and get it out there and go, "Oh, I think, I would like to be one of these early adopters," right? As opposed to, some of the other ones that would maybe the late adopters and laggards, on
Hmm.
that curve of innovation that we've talked
Hmm.
about several times.
Hmm.
Um, and so that I think that concept kind of illustrates, in my view, how, if you have trained managers who understand who their employees are, you can then better manage, even within your work group,
Right.
how to, get people to, get those early adopters, and get those other people on board through some of those social interactions that we've talked about for
Right. Right. Right.
40 something episodes now.
work management style is key to this entire
Yeah,
process.
yeah,
Yeah, deeply linked.
deeply.
Yeah. And so it must be very interesting when you have a manager who fits into a certain personality type grouping, and then a team of people that might be an assortment. And so how that person plugs in, there's a little bit of self-awareness, there's a little bit of external awareness, and then how those two personalities naturally come together could be more affinitive or less affinitive. And that then brings its own type of management that needs to be managed,
Right.
if that makes any
Where a
sense.
Yep.
transformative leader may want nothing to do with what makes their people, his or her people tick. They just, here's my vision. It's the
Go
right
do
way to
it.
go.
Yeah.
You're all here for a reason. Go and do it. Or conversely, a transformative leader may want that data to make sure that their vision has legs and that they've got the right people with
Yeah.
them to make it happen. A laissez-faire
Yeah.
leader,
Good.
test what? Why? Right? The job is getting done. No,
Right.
so yeah. Deeply,
Yeah.
deeply linked.
And it's interesting too, because I think as we've talked about this notion of change curve, people earlier, people middle, people later, that kind of thing, I wanna make sure that we're not coming across as disparaging of anyone in that cycle, because there are definite benefits to the folks that sit in those really broad categories. You need people who are gonna be on the, sort of the avant-garde end of things, helping to promote the change, helping people to see the benefits. There are people who are in that maybe early adopter, middle adopter type group that will help you stabilize things and help it go from sort of wild west of let's try this, let's try that, let's kind of throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks to okay, now we've got something that might really work in our organization. Let's build it out. Let's kind of sort of formalize it a little bit. Let's put some structure around it, put some heft around it, put some organizational muscle around it. And then that helps bring those later folks on. They see, oh, wow, this is really working. It's not just some kind of wackadoodle theory or some experiment. It's really going to benefit us. We'll come on board. And then all of that can help the people who are real slow to adopt sort of see, yeah, this is the way the company is going now, or this is the way my team is moving. I better get on the bus, or maybe, it's not for me and I'll go find another opportunity somewhere, and that's okay too. So it's
Sure.
not meant in a disparaging way at all,
No,
but think it seems like from what I'm hearing that some of these assessment tools can help leaders figure out where people are on a given day or in a given month and how to help take advantage of those skills, personalities, types, all that kind of stuff to move that change further, faster, with less resistance, less kerfuffle, if
absolutely.
that
And
makes sense.
it's a gift. It's an advantage. It absolutely can provide insights into big plans and big changes. And think about emotional intelligence, right? The whole EQ conversation. To know yourself better through any one of these assessments that have been tried and true, that can only be an advantage to any company who wants to propel their workers, give purpose, give meaning, agency, self-efficacy. I mean, I would want to know, and it's a I would want to know if I were, neurotic every day and keeping the team back because I couldn't handle the stress, like help me be better at that. Maybe I should be in that
Right.
role. So it's an advantage no matter who you are in that chain. But it
Absolutely.
needs to be communicated that way, and it needs to be handled that way, and it can't be
Right.
used unethically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So
That's a big component. Use these
absolutely.
things with ethics. Yep.
Oh yeah, for sure. And so what it comes down to, in some ways, it sounds like what we're saying is that a lot of these assessment tools can be one part of our toolkit as change leaders, as change
That's
practitioners,
right.
to help people with some of the stuff that we've talked about many times before. And I hate to beat a dead horse or just come back, but it seems like we always keep coming back to these same core fundamental things in terms of to apply these, you have to know yourself, you have to know your audience, and you have to understand how to communicate individually and tailor your communications. How do you repeat the same communication in different ways, provide people different ways to grasp onto what you're trying to tell them through different types of communication channels, different media, that kind of stuff. And then, Cheryl, something you said ages ago is meet people where they are. So you're not trying to speak to them in a place where they were a year ago or where you want them to be in a year, but where are they right now? What do they need to hear to understand how to get where you want them to be? And then, of course, adjusting all of this for how urgent is your change? What's the scope of your change? All of these kinds of things. What's like you said few minutes ago, what's the culture of this organization and all of these things. And so these assessments just fit in so nicely to some of the stuff that we've highlighted,
Abs
highlighted
absolutely, and
for so many
you
episodes.
reminded me too, Ben, that think about people who just stress with the idea of taking a test, right? That's a whole population of people.
Hmm.
Topic, if we're going to talk about assessments, you need to know that the person that you are about to give that to has that level of anxiety around test taking, and Does that invalidate their data? I mean, it may well. So that
Sure.
knowledge of the
Right. You know, and
these
something,
assessments are
I mean,
one part of it.
right, for sure. I mean, we just recently talked about imposter syndrome and crisis of confidence. People can get very nervous. Some people get very nervous taking certain types of tests. And then something we've kind of teased at in a couple of our more recent episodes is neurodivergence. And so obviously some people are going to do much better at certain types of assessments and certain types of tests and other maybe not so much. So how do you get at the same type of endpoint in a totally different way? That may be too big of a nut to crack right now, but that's
Sure.
It's a
in
great
this day and age, everyone is or should be very aware that there are lots of different folks in the workplace now, and you can still take advantage of all that depending upon what you have them doing can be very useful.
it's a huge topic, and I know that we'll have an episode soon about that, entirely devoted to neurodivergence at work.
I was going to say you just
Yeah.
opened up a new topic for us to talk for an upcoming episode. So, well, folks, I think we've come to that time. Thank you all for joining us. Please visit us at harmoniousworkplaces.com. Let us know what you thought about this episode. We'd love to get your thoughts. This is just a gloss overview. There's so much more in depth that we
Oh,
could
yeah.
go into on this,
Oh, yeah.
and we'd love your thoughts and feedback. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And until then, make change your friend.
Thanks for listening to Harmonious Workplaces. You can find Harmonious Workplaces on LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, Spotify, Amazon, Apple, and other streaming platforms. We'd love any feedback on whatever channel you find us on. Please rate, like, and share our podcast with your network, and remember to add Harmonious Workplaces to your list of favorites to get notified about each new episode. To contact Rich or Cheryl, please visit www.workbalanceconsulting.com. To connect with Ben, find him on LinkedIn or visit at www.harborsidestrategy.com.